Mahajer, and this morning I'll be joined by political scientist and constitutional scholar Miranda Yaver to discuss what's on the ballot. With 4 days left until Election Day, we're going to break down the latest headlines. This is the AM Report. Good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining the broadcast. It is Friday, October 30th, with 1 day left till Halloween, and the horror show is sure to come, and 4 days left till Election Day. If you're watching, leave us a comment. Let us know what you're thinking, what your thoughts are as we approach what is the most consequential election probably in American history, and let me know what you think. And if you're watching on the HAPS platform, you can now add click the little award button and give us a little award if you're enjoying the broadcast, and let us know what you're thinking of the broadcast. But we have a lot of headlines to cover this morning. First and foremost, with 4 days left until Election Day, 84 million Americans have already voted, according to the U.S. Elections Project. A federal appeals court has ordered election officials in Minnesota to set aside any mail-in ballots that are received after 8 p.m. on November 3rd, despite a 7-day extension that the state enacted to count all ballots. 17 Trump supporters were rushed to the hospital at a rally in Tampa, Florida yesterday amidst extreme heat, which, is just another metaphor for all of 2020. And a Minneapolis police union is recruiting retired police officers to serve as poll challengers in a, quote, problem area of the city at the request of Trump campaign attorneys, which is a consistent trend that we're seeing with GOP calls to observe polls, which is sounding to a lot of people, including to me, like a bit of voter intimidation. So that's kind of what's going on. I'll also note that the tropical storm Zeta is wreaking havoc along the Gulf Coast. So everyone who's along the Gulf Coast, please stay safe and be careful, observe evacuation orders. So I'd like to welcome a good friend of the program, and it's the last time that we're going to see each other before the actual election day. It's Miranda Yaver. She's a political scientist and constitutional scholar at UCLA. Welcome to the program yet again, Miranda.
Thanks so much for having me, Alex. I cannot believe it's the last time we're going to see each other before the election day is sort of an outdated concept, but before the conclusion of the election.
Yeah, and we text every Thursday just to confirm that you'll be back because you're on every Friday, and you're texting me and you're like, I can't believe it's going to be the last time before this is all over, and I was like, ... maybe. So, and really, maybe, and it's one of the top things I'd like to discuss with you is what appears to be just an all-out, I'm going to call it a death rattle by the Republican establishment and the GOP and the Trump campaign to just launch this multi-pronged assault on voting on counting ballots, after they're received by the 8 p.m. deadline, even though they're postmarked on Election Day. What are you seeing in your purview are the biggest problems in terms of this assault on voting rights across the state, across the country? And is it democratic? Like, what's your take?
It is not democratic, and by that I mean small d. It doesn't favor the Democratic Party, big D, but it's very hostile to democracy. It's been a very disturbing few days because it's really hammering home that the judicial branch, which is supposed to be, this protector of law and norms, is not acting as a safeguard of democracy, of democratic norms, which is, that people who are eligible should be allowed to participate in the democratic process, casting ballots on or before November 3rd. To have the Court of Appeals say that ballots that are received later but postmarked before Election Day can't be counted is really an act of voter suppression, and not one that is unfortunately standing out enough amid other rulings that have been favorable to state Republican Party efforts to halt the counting of ballots, to restrict which kinds of ballots can count. So Wisconsin, there was a win there as well. And so, this is something that unfortunately is not new. What's also scary to me is that now a third of the Supreme Court worked on Bush 43's legal team to halt the counting of ballots in Florida in 2000. John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett were all part of that legal effort. And so we also can't really say with much confidence that things are going to go well if they wind up at the Supreme Court of the United States as opposed to the Court of Appeals.
Yeah, and it sends chills down my spine. But before I get to my next question, we've got a lot of welcomes and hellos. Shivani says hello from Brooklyn. Mark Goldman from LA. We got a high five award. Lucia gave us a listen up award. Yolanda Hosey is saying go blue. Sean Perry from Paris. Shivani is really upset about the concept of poll challengers. Christopher Drago is saying good morning. Lucia gave us a listen up award. Dean is saying it's called heat exhaustion. He's talking about this Trump rally in Tampa. It's called heat exhaustion, foreshadowing to heat stroke. Renegade Falco, who's a frequent commenter, and I just do want to address his comment. He's calling me an activist journalist, and Renegade Falco, activist and journalist. But that activist and journalist, but activist journalism, I'm not sure. Pablo de la Hoya says hello from Los Angeles and gave us a newsworthy award. If you're watching on the HAPS platform, HAPS website, or on your app, shoot us a little award and let us know you're enjoying the broadcast. But with that, Miranda, so this whole concept that I find really frightening, and amongst the justices that you're talking about, and also it's being forecast a little bit in the language that's coming out of the Supreme Court, is this distinction between ballots that are received before 8 p.m. on November 3rd and then after 8 p.m. on November 3rd. And this attempt to suggest that ballots that are received after 8 p.m. on November 3rd would, quote, flip the outcome, which I think is just chilling language, because there's no outcome to flip if they're all a part of the same electorate pool. So do you see a problem with that kind of language? Is that where this is going to end up, where there's a distinction drawn between the two?
Yeah, I agree that there isn't really an outcome to flip. They're all, if you're talking about ballots that were cast before Election Day or on Election Day, on or before November 3rd, they're contributing to the initial outcome, essentially. The concept of Election Day is really about media coverage and ratings. There isn't any rule that says that we have to have the election results immediately. We certainly didn't get the election results immediately in the 19th century or the 18th century. It takes time to count things, and especially now that we are voting through lots of different ways, vote by mail versus in person. Some of them have electronic, some of them are paper ballots. So, the idea of immediacy being more important than accuracy is very troubling, and especially when it's not just an issue of media framing, but rather deciding which ballots count and which ones don't. Because at the end of the day, when we're suppressing people's ability when we're denying people's ability to have their ballots counted when they were cast on or before Election Day, that's an act of voter suppression. And so this was something that, there was some slippage in the language in Brett Kavanaugh's opinion recently, in which he also incidentally referred to Bush v. Gore in a in a non-critical way. And it's just like, well, this wasn't exactly supposed to be a case to which we should look as a guiding principle.
A lot of people have a lot of legal minds have a great deal of criticism about the outcome of Bush v. Gore. I'll just note it is not one of our finest legal moments. But Mark Goldman is asking, Miranda, are we heading towards a constitutional crisis? And Lucia, another question, but sort of in keeping with the theme of this question, how worried are you guys of the outcome, no matter who wins?
So I'll take Mark's question. I've been wrestling with whether we're at a constitutional crisis for a couple of years. And for a while, I have said no, because ultimately, we've had the courts that have to some extent operated as somewhat of a check, sometimes more than others. Right now, we have an administration that is slowing down the postal service, making it harder for ballots to arrive on time. And we have courts that are making it actively impeding the ability of ballots to be counted. And we have a president who has not committed to respecting the outcome of an election. If he doesn't win, and it doesn't look like he's going to win, and we don't have a court that is seeming to be willing to operate as a meaningful constraint against this president, and a Congress that has given him immense authority to fill judicial vacancies despite his hostility to democratic norms. And so, yeah, I think we are very much headed to a constitutional crisis if the president loses.
Lucia says Alex, she's privately saying, but I'm going to read it out loud because I think it's hilarious, that my eye roll should totally be an award. No poker face. And in terms of your question, Lucia, that how worried are you guys of the outcome of the election? I lose sleep at night over not the outcome, the valid certified outcome of the election, but the attempts to circumvent the will of the people in the courts, which I have a bad feeling is coming, but we don't know. We really don't know what's going to happen. There are so many possible scenarios after November 3rd. There's a good potential that Joe Biden walks away with a clear, commanding victory. I'll note that 84 million Americans have already voted. This is going to be a record turnout. So maybe there isn't an issue with late counted ballots that are counted late, because the victory is already so commanding. But there's no question. There's also the possibility that states like Texas, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, right, they flip, which would also, make it impossible for Donald Trump to get the number of electoral college votes that he'd need to secure victory. So there are ways in which Joe Biden secures a victory that are undeniable. It's just not clear whether we will know on election night, or how much this is going to depend on ballots that are arriving after November 3rd. I think there's a good deal of indication that there's a lot of early vote that's happening that may give us a commanding result. If not, I will be very concerned. I will be very concerned if it appears to be close on election night. So let's just hope, for the sake of democracy, that by election night, it's very clear that it's a commanding lead by whomever is going to win. And
I think that I agree. I think that the problem is going to be when it's close one way or another. I don't think that any amount of litigation is going to be able to circumvent the outcome of a landslide, of a blowout. And that is certainly a possibility, but I certainly wouldn't take it for granted. And everyone who's watching us who hasn't voted now should absolutely do so.
Yeah, I think you're seeing what the GOP strategy, they're projecting what it's going to be. They're projecting that if it's close, that they are going to try to disenfranchise votes that are counted after November 3rd. So that's why it's very important for people to vote early, vote now. There's still 4 days. If you don't know how, iwillvote.com is a great resource. We have another award, the Golden Mike Award. If you're watching this broadcast and enjoy it on the HAPS platform, click the little award button and shoot us an award. And if you're not, visit haps.tv/Alex and subscribe. It's such a great platform. Speaking also to Lucia's comment and concern, and what is really such a frequent sentiment, just this anxiety about the election. Here's a little funny little Twitter user who kind of spoke to this issue the other day, and this video tickled me. So. I just loved that when I saw it because I was like, someone finally is speaking to my pain. Saying early voting and fundraising seems to be a great indication of voter enthusiasm. What do you?
And on that note, I just wanted to share a statistic that I saw this morning, which is that over 9 million people in Texas have voted, which is 53% of their registered voters have already cast ballots, and that is, if I'm remembering correctly, 100% of their 2016 turnout. I'm not placing bets on how Texas goes, or I have, but it's not the way the Democrats are hoping. But the fact that we have had so much voter enthusiasm for early voting is a really encouraging sign, both as far as democratic norms go. We want people to be able to participate, but we also know that voter enthusiasm and greater voter turnout also benefits Democrats.
Yeah, I think that we discussed this on the show yesterday. I've been watching Texas very closely, and I think there's something very exciting happening there, and I'm keeping my eye on it. The other thing that's interesting to note, we could lose every notable swing state. We could lose North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Florida, Iowa. We can lose all those states and win Texas, and we would have an electoral college victory on election night because Texas has very prohibitive absentee ballot laws. They don't really have mail-in voting, so we're going to know Texas on November 3rd. And there's 1.8 million new voter registrations in that state since 2016, which represents 12% of the electorate, a 12% increase. And we know that Hillary Clinton lost by 9 points. And the Senate candidate in 2018, Beto O'Rourke, lost by less than 3 points. So I'm keeping my eye on Texas. I agree. Let's not get overly optimistic, but there's a huge turnout there.
It's not 2020, definitely 2024.
Yeah, it's coming. It may not be right when we needed it, but it's coming. So, Miranda, any final thoughts? This is the last time that I'm going to see you. Well, I'll talk to you next week, and we'll either be, drinking on air, or we'll be,
Irish coffee.
It's coffee. Next week, it could be a bottle of gin. Any final thoughts as we go into the last 4 days here?
So everyone who hasn't voted should vote. They should remind other people to vote. I think spend the next 4 days in a way that won't make you spend election night wondering what if you had spent these last 4 days differently. Do what you need to do to manage your anxiety, but try to channel it somewhere constructive. I've been texting voters in swing states whenever I get a little nervous about polls or something like that, or find myself refreshing 538 compulsively. Call people, but also do a little self-care. But it's the last 4 days, and we can get through this. But make sure that you're not going to spend the election night looking back regretfully.
Yes, and really hopeful comment from Lucia Ibar. She says that in the Dominican Republic, we got rid of a 16-year regime, even when they tried to rig the votes. And it was because everyone went out to vote in July in the middle of the pandemic. And something to that, Lucia. So, Miranda, where can people find you and support you?
I live on Twitter. My handle is @MirandaYaver. Reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. This has been Miranda Yaver. She's a constitutional scholar and political scientist. Thanks so much for joining the AM Report for Haps News, the network of now. I'm Alex Mahajer. We are live every weekday morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific, 10:30 Eastern, with all of your quick political news and headlines to get your day started right. If you like this journalism, please consider sponsoring it. Visit me at haps.tv/@Alex and subscribe. And we'll be back Monday morning with Los Angeles County District Attorney candidate George Gascon to talk about his race to unseat LA District Attorney, embattled LA District Attorney Jackie Lacey. Thanks so much. Yeah, very good. Thanks so much for joining, and thank you, Miranda. And we'll see you all next